Thank you very much. And for the moment, we are still on schedule. So we are now going to listen to Mr. Mordue from Director General Home Affairs, and I want also to thank him, but also the Directorate, because we will have many speakers coming from the Directorate during this day to the workshops. So please, Mr. Mordue.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm recently appointed to this new area of work for me, so I'm not entirely sure what makes me the most nervous, addressing you directly before Thomas, Daniel and Simon, some of the best-known academics in this field, or the announcement of the flurry of Donald Trump-style tweets during today's event. More seriously, I think we're here to discuss today a topic that has both dominated the European Union's political agenda, but one which is also seen by many of our citizens as one of the key challenges that we face. I'm talking about the impact of what have been the largest migrant and refugee flows that we've seen since the Second World War on our own continent. I think one thing that is very clear is that no single country can deal with this alone. What happens in Lesvos is felt equally in Athens, but it's also felt in Rome, Paris, Stockholm and across our continent. Now, before I come onto the impact of the migratory flows on the European Union and how we are trying to deal with this, I want to make one thing very clear, and that is that protecting the life and rights of migrants and refugees inside and outside the European Union is at the heart of our agenda, and I think it is also part of the DNA that makes Europe what it is today. I think it's a fundamental value of the democracies that form the European Union to protect people in need. Migration is part of our rich and diverse culture, and it has always had a positive impact on the development of the continent in which we all live. And I think refugees should know that they should be able to find a place of safety in Europe. Let me turn now to how we are trying to deal with this migratory challenge. And let me be very clear, I think that at the beginning, responses have been frankly uncoordinated, and they've often been improvised at a national level. We have seen strong mobilization and welcoming attitudes, but I think we've also seen fences, walls, and an attempt to make migrants someone else's problem. This, and let's not mistake this has increasingly divided the European Union and our citizens, and I think it's also put the core value of solidarity at stake. And I think it has also threatened what is a major achievement of the European Union, which many of us take for granted, namely the free movement of the European Union citizens. So since 2015, since the summer in particular, one of the main aspects that have driven our policy response is trying to improve the coordination of our actions and reach common decisions. I think we've also tried to implement pragmatic solutions to encourage and ensure solidarity, and what I would describe as a fair sharing of responsibilities between member states. Let me try and give you a sense of some of what we've tried to do. I'll begin with some of our actions outside the European Union. In 2016 alone, more than 5,000 people died while trying to cross the sea to reach Europe. This is a tragedy, and our operations at sea have rescued over 400,000 people in the Mediterranean and the Aegean in 2015 and 2016, but there are still far too many deaths. One of the things we've tried to do at the European Union is therefore step up some coordinated actions at the EU level to replace some of these dangerous migratory routes by organised, safe and legal pathways to Europe. Over 14,000 people in need of protection have been resettled to the EU since the summer of 2015, and to build on this, the Commission has proposed last July a permanent resettlement framework to provide for a more predictable and harmonised approach at EU level. We've also been trying to work on a common approach to fight smuggling. 9 in 10 migrants have paid criminal organisations to reach the European Union, often in inhumane conditions and at the mercy of people who frankly have no scruples. We have strengthened our judicial approach, but we're also trying to better prevent irregular migration through dedicated capacity building and work together with our countries, third country partners. We've also tried to reinforce our support for countries outside the European Union. I think it's important to underline that the European Union is the #1 donor of humanitarian aid. We're helping displaced people within Syria, as well as Syrian refugees and their host communities in Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, Turkey and Egypt, and more than €9 billion has already been mobilised. Within the EU, inside the EU, we've also been attempting to provide support for the frontline member states, Greece and Italy. This is not only financially, but it's also through staff deployed on the ground. And we've also been trying to relieve the pressure there by the relocation of refugees to other member states. But I think, as the scenes on the Greek islands so visibly show, member states still need to do much, much more. We're also working to create an asylum system in Europe that is more humane, more fair and efficient. The new system we have proposed includes a fairness mechanism, allowing relocation of refugees every time a member state is faced with intense pressure on its borders. And let's be clear about this. Solidarity between member states has to be built into the system. And for me, solidarity does not mean donating a blanket or two. In parallel, we've been looking to reinforce our controls at our external borders. The recently created European Border and Coast Guard can now count on a pool of 1,500 border guards that can be deployed in 5 days. Teams can also intervene in neighbouring third countries. We're about to start negotiations with Serbia and the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia in this regard to conclude operational agreements. Now, these measures should gradually help us return to a functioning Schengen area, a normal functioning Schengen area. And this is important. It not only impacts on the reintroduction of internal borders not only impacts upon citizens' lives, but it has a huge economic costs. Some of the studies we've run to try and get a grip of what this economic cost potentially represents show that the cost of reintroduction of internal borders over 10 years would represent between 5 billion and 18 billion euro per year. Now, one of the things that I think is important is that reducing the number of persons who are arriving through irregular channels in EU member states and agreeing on a better cooperation on readmission and return, this is a necessary prerequisite for also being more generous in providing legal pathways to protection. I think our efforts to protect those in need must go hand in hand with increased efforts to return those who are not in need of protection. And I think only such a setup will politically ensure that the necessary solidarity between member states will be created, which allows for the protection of those who are truly in need of protection. This brings me to the somewhat controversial EU-Turkey statement. I think I would like to point out first and foremost that this has delivered results in terms of the management of irregular flows. The attempts to cross the Aegean have decreased to around 83 per day on average since the statement came into effect. This contrasts with up to 10,000 daily arrivals at certain peaks in 2015. One other point I want to flag here very strongly is that in the 10-month period before the statement came into effect, so I'm talking about the period from April 2015 to early, I'm talking about the period from April 2015 to early 2016, over 1,064 people were reported dead or missing in the Aegean Sea. In the same period after the statement came into operation, there were only 69. Now, 69 is still far too many, but it's nevertheless a drop of over 1,000 deaths in the period before. I think here I'd like to just turn to another point, which is the positive contribution that migrants bring to the development of their communities of origin and also to our own societies. Again, this is something we've been looking at in detail, and we've calculated that the impact of the recent inflow of refugees on the European Union's GDP should be positive, already about 0.2% by the end of this year. And this brings me to another point. We need migrants in the European Union. Europe is an ageing continent with increasing skill shortages in certain key sectors. Also, the cost of non-integration is much higher than the cost of investment in integration policies. I think a quick legal integration of migrants is therefore both key for them, but it's also key for us. And this is one of the reasons why, to support Member States, we have proposed a comprehensive action plan on integration and an ambitious reform of the Blue Card. This is the kind of European response to the American Green Card system. I think we want to attract and also retain highly skilled third country nationals. But let's be frank, the situation today is still far from perfect. We're regularly reminding Member States about their commitments, in particular with regard to relocation and resettlement. Some of you may have seen already this week there was an update on this latest situation on relocation and resettlement. I think Member States also need to be much more proactive when it comes to legal migration and integration. But I think the situation is slowly improving, and the raft of proposals which are on the table at the moment, once adopted, will mean that I think we begin to have the necessary tools in place. But we also need structured long-term solutions to address modern migration challenges worldwide and their root causes. Now, Nevin Mimica will talk to you a bit about this in more detail this afternoon, but I think I would underline that with our new partnership framework approach, we have started a genuine political dialogue with countries of origin and transit. We're trying to help them in their management of migration, including readmissions and fight against criminal networks that are putting the lives of migrants at risk. And in this respect, we've already seen, I think, some quite positive results in our cooperation with Niger. But it's also about, at the same time, looking to tackle some of the root causes of migration. Here we have the EU Emergency Trust Fund for Africa, set up as a result of the Valletta Summit. This is aiming to promote economic and equal opportunities and security and development in our partner countries. And we've also announced last September a new European Union external investment plan, which has the aim of unlocking at least 44 billion euro of investments from primarily the private sector in partner countries. I would end by just underlining that I think the priority set at the beginning of this Commission, that Europe needs to manage migration better in all aspects, from the humanitarian imperative to the need for solidarity and the demographic and skills challenge, is valid more than ever today. On our side as the Commission, we're fully committed to achieving the important objective of shaping an integrated, sustainable and holistic EU migration policy. Thank you very much for your attention.